listening to Transformation in Trials. Welcome to Transformation in Trials. This is a podcast exploring all things transformational in clinical trials. Nothing is off limits on the show, and we will have guests from the whole spectrum of the clinical trials community. And we're your hosts, Ivana and Sam. Welcome to another episode of Transformation in Trials. Today in the studio, we have Leif Kuse with us, who is a Trailblazer in clinical outsourcing and the CEO of PHARALL. Hi, Leif.
Hey, Ivana. Thank you for having me. It's a great pleasure to be on your show.
Awesome. I've been really excited for doing this episode with you, where we'll focus on the theme of group purchasing for biotechs. And Leif, just to set the stage, can you tell us more about how do biotech companies usually contract with CROs to conduct clinical trials?
That's a very good question. It a little bit depends on whether people are more experienced in this field or are doing this for the very first time. So, sometimes you have, CEOs and executives in clinical outsourcing where they have done this since many decades and really have an idea of what the real process would look like, RFP process, RFI process, collecting all the proposals from vendors. So they already know what to do. But most of the people that we deal with are small, mid-sized biotech companies who outsource preclinical trials, but now get into the arena of clinical trials, where it's getting a little bit more difficult to understand what are the differences between the CROs, how to compare contracts, how to compare proposals, how to compare budgets, and they're a little bit lost, and they do what they can, but if I may say, they are scientists. They are not the commercial and financial people. So there is, I would say, room for improvement. And this is, I would say, where my primary domain is. I'm doing this since 2 decades now, outsourcing clinical trials, negotiating with CROs, getting the right budgets and the CROs to get all the ducks in the line.
And we will dive way more into that, but we have a pretty broad church of listeners. So maybe just a very basic question. Why don't the biotechs just run these trials themselves? Why do they outsource?
This is a general strategic question. Why to outsource, right? And, you can compare outsourcing. That many people misunderstand this. They just think about we are hiring a vendor and they're doing the stuff for us. But for me, outsourcing is more than that. You expand your organization by a broader team that is specialized in conducting, executing those clinical trials. And this is, I think, how you should consider outsourcing, as a sudden expansion of your organization. And you need to, be aware that you also need to put all the processes in place to have this broader department within your organization, which, consists of several additional 20, 30, 50 people who are supporting you in your clinical trial projects. And for that, this is a huge step forward for a small biotech company who maybe, expands their personnel, if I may say, to a certain tenfold amount of people now. And this needs to be organized and this needs to be structured.
That is actually a very interesting way to see that not only you don't just get a vendor, you actually get an extension of your process that needs to cover both yourself, but also the new vendor. I wonder, what are the dynamics of that, and where could that break?
Oh, honestly, the dynamics are really broad. It starts with having the right interfaces in place, having the right process in place, but also having the right culture and have the right cultural fit between your vendor and what you're doing. This is a huge difference, and you need to establish this. And this is often overseen and saying, okay, we just outsource this and now they're responsible to do that. You can do that, and that works if you have, a common sense together with your vendor that you want to have a turnkey project and say, okay, here's the protocol, go for it and come back when everything is finished. But this is, I would say, the ideal case that happens, and I've seen those projects as well. But in most cases, in clinical trials, it's not like building a bridge where we know how wide the river is and how much steel we need. We are in no man's land where we don't know how wide the river is. So things happen, and we need to sit together and work with a vendor together. How can we overcome with scientific, operational, and strategically challenges? And for that, we need all those processes. We need to work as a team together, and that is, I think, the key of the operational part of outsourcing, apart from all the stuff of selecting the right vendor, negotiation budgets, and stuff like that.
Well, Leif, and it sounds like you are involved in a broad perspective of this whole process. Can you tell us more about where you would come in when a biotech wants to outsource?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and maybe to explain a little bit where we come from. I started my career 20 years ago, and I was asked by our management, "Hey, where's all our money going? And why are you spending so much money to the CROs?" So in return, in the end, we end up with the conclusion, "Hey, we need to build up all those processes and interfaces with our vendors, which means we need to build up a purchasing department." So that's what I did for 7 years, building up the purchasing department, implementing all the processes in place to get the CROs on board, to contract them, but also having a supportive connection with the clinical development department when it comes to all those organizational, but also operational, financial, and commercial discussions. I then quit and built up my own consultancy company where we took all the lessons learned and supported small, mid-sized biotech companies in outsourcing their clinical trials. To transport all the information, all the knowledge that we have gained in the previous years, because it's easier to learn from someone who has done it before, been there, done that, have the T-shirt, rather than making all the mistakes over and over again. We were very quickly hired also by big pharma companies, and there we saw that big pharma is dealing with their vendors on a completely different level, more on a strategic level. And we wanted to have this for small and mid-sized biotech companies as well, especially when it's getting to recurring business, better discounts, nice additional services that, those CROs are providing to the big pharma boys and girls in our industry. And we decided to adapt the group purchasing model of other industries in our industry to leverage the business volume of many biotech companies to achieve those gains that usually is only available for big pharma companies. So this is where we come in. We help clients from the very basic operational perspective in negotiating the budgets, reducing costs, and implementing all those interfaces that you need for your organization with your CRO. But we also have this framework of group purchasing where we can leverage the business volume of many clients globally.
Well, I do want to dive into something that you just mentioned, that there's a difference between what kind of services and what kind of pricing big pharmaceutical companies get and what kind of services and pricing that smaller biotechs can get from the same pool of CROs. Can you tell us more about how that may differ?
In terms of amounts or percentages?
Well, not necessarily. Well, we can start looking at the services part. Can you buy the same service if you're a very small company and if you're a very big pharmaceutical company from a CRO?
Let's put it differently. You have completely different interfaces and levels of communication with your CRO if you're a small biotech company or if you're a big pharma company. Of course, I mean it makes sense for a CRO to put more communication lines if you have a client who has a huge pipeline in their portfolio, rather than having just one phase 1 trial where you're conducting just one trial, and then maybe in like 3-4 years, when everything goes well, you have other opportunities or new opportunities. So that means that, of course, big pharma gets also additional strategical support from their vendors in terms of, okay, how can we build up this pipeline and stuff like that, but also from other directions, which makes sense because in the end, there's a huge business behind that. And this makes sense to attract these customers a little bit more than having a small or mid-sized biopharma company, which means in the end that the bigger your volume is, the higher the attention that you're getting in, all the directions. If projects go wrong, you get more attention. If you need more strategical support, you get this attention, which you don't get to that extent as a small and mid-sized biopharma company. And this is business. That's fair, and it's understandable.
But you also mentioned that you work with this group purchasing concept for smaller biotechs. Can you tell us more about what that is like and how that may solve some of these challenges?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the idea was to adapt the business model, because we wanted to have a framework that puts us in a position that we can more speak to our vendors on the same eye level. Like if you're a small biotech company and you're dealing with a big CRO, there's a huge difference in size and financial power and resources, which is difficult then to deal with this vendor, right? But if you have a bigger volume, you can more speak on the same eye level, and this is what we are leveraging. The other industries and group purchasing, it's a totally old concept. It's nothing that we have invented. All other industries are working in group purchasing and aligning their purchasing volume to leverage this business volume, but nobody does this in clinical trials, which has a lot of reasons. One reason of which is that usually group purchasing is done when you're purchasing commodities like syringes. Hospitals are doing this as well, but clinical trials is not a commodity. Clinical trial, it's every project is unique. It's always in a different indication. It's always a different compound. It's a different client. It starts at different points in time. And the size of the projects is also different. So we need to take care. We needed to adapt this, business model that usually works for commodities and adapt this to individual projects, which is, one of the, I would say, key assets or key ideas that we invented to implement this in clinical trial services. That's what it makes difficult from a standpoint. How can we adapt this? But honestly, in the end, it's super easy.
That is interesting. I'm curious because you also mentioned that one of the things you help with is this process between the biotech company and the CRO. Is that also something that is possible to do across different companies, kind of standardize the way that we work with CROs, or is that always individual?
Yeah, I mean, I understand your question, and in certain instance it works, and in certain instance it doesn't. But it has many advantages that are not promising heaven on earth, but it is a strategically additional option that you can choose to make things a little bit better than we've done it in our industry before. And what I say by this is when we talk about group purchasing, everyone is, thinking of, oh, okay, so we have a bigger volume and they think financially, yeah, so now we get the better discounts, and with that we have some cost savings, which we have. And this is, one of the key assets, but it's just part of the story. The second part of the story is what you're mentioning, is that we can implement the same interfaces with our vendors. So which means once we have have defined it once, we can adapt this also to other biotech companies. So there's less friction in there because everyone already knows what the process is and how it should look like in terms of, the whole vendor selection process, contracting process, but also other processes when it comes to project controlling, financial controlling and stuff like that. So this is definitely something that, that the overall vision and goal of PHARALL is that we have these, interfaces and processes in place and, develop it once and then adapt it multiple times. This is one of the efficiency. And then there's a third efficiency, which goes into quality. And for me, this is the more important and more hidden aspect, but I think the overall advantage of the whole business model, and that is that we not only decrease the costs because of the economies of scale, but we can also increase the quality of services that we're receiving from our CROs, and also to improve I would say, the vendor customer relationship. And how does this work? And it's very straightforward. When we were just, I would say, outsourcing consultants, you always have these, difficult situations when projects go wrong. Then you have the discussions: whose fault is that? Who has to pay for that? Yada, yada, yada. And these discussions become a little bit more easier. Again, I'm not promising heaven on earth, but it becomes a little bit easier when you are in difficult, discussions with your vendor, when you can just say, hey guys, can we just maybe go an extra mile and put a smile on the face of this customer, because we're currently outsourcing another trial for another client, and they ask us, how is the performance? How is our customer satisfied with the service that they are getting from this CRO? So if everyone is happy, here's your next project. If not, things get a little bit more difficult. So, by that we can leverage a little bit the overall purchasing volume of many clients in a way that, it is attractive for everyone, not only for the client, but also for the CRO, because they see the recurring business in the overall framework, which makes sense for them maybe also to go to their management and say, hey guys, can we please maybe go the extra mile for this client? And can we have this internal approval for that? Because it definitely has advantages for our upcoming trials.
But it also sounds like, because you have personal relationships with the different CROs and the biotechs, that you can kind of act as that glue that makes sure that things can go smoothly across the company borders.
That's totally the idea, but it's not only me, right? It's the organization in a whole that our outsourcing managers understand this model and understand the advantages of this model and leverage this to all of our clients.
How could a biotech be a part of this group purchasing scenario?
That's a good question. Super easy. We have a GPO contract, which is the usual process in group purchasing organizations, that you join this GPO as a member. It's a membership agreement, which has a lot of legal clauses, but in essence it just says, okay, once you applied and become a member of our alliance, you're eligible to contract CROs that are working with this alliance to those preferred terms and use those preferred interfaces and contracts. Costs you nothing. We have no membership fees or anything. So there's just advantages in there. And there's also no strings attached. We have, biotech companies who say, yeah, that's nice. You have some nice CROs there, and we already considered to contract them, but doing this via PHARALL is nice. But we are currently in the selection process, and we would like to include also other CROs just to make sure, that, we really get a fair market price and everything is going well. And we are totally agnostic on this. Sometimes clients come up with vendors that we were not aware, where we can then say, hey, that's a nice vendor and we love what they are providing. Maybe they can join the alliance as well. So, it's a very straightforward process. It has no strings attached. And also, although we are providing those services like, yeah, we support you in the RFP process and negotiations, nobody has to, right? For me, a client is also fine if they say, yeah, we have our own outsourcing department. We don't need you as our outsourcing department, but we like your, additional advantages in the GPO. So can we just join and do our stuff on our own? And that's fine.
Mm. Hey, I'm curious, what is the right CRO for a biotech? Are there any criteria that you should look at?
That's a good question. I get this question, I think, from everyone. And, of course, there are some vendors which I would not include in my RFP process. And, sometimes I suggest to clients to include this or that. And they, oh, no, we already had some bad experience with them. That is fair. Sometimes things go wrong. It's also a people's business. And, sometimes people do not harmonize. So it's not working out, but it's more a broader view on that we have in saying, okay, there might be some, projects which are more crappy, and it's not the best or ideal situation at that point in time. But in general, the service that they're providing is good, has a good value. So yeah, what is the best CRO? Honestly, for me, it's a question of what kind of client we have. And what I mean by that is sometimes you have clients who are conducting their first trial and it's their first baby, and they would like to be involved in each and every single process because, they've never done it. So that would not be the right CRO for you, if I may say. So it's better to maybe go for a mid-sized or smaller vendor who have are used to have clients like this and with this, more closely interaction. Sometimes if it's more a mature biotech company, it definitely makes sense to go to other vendors who I call turnkey vendors. They say, here's the protocol, and run through our pipeline, but very smoothly and very quickly. So it's like a marriage. You need to find your right partner. It is something like having the right chemistry amongst the people. That is the key. And this is also the key in the RFP process, and especially in the bid defense meeting, that people talk to each other and get to know each other. And already in the bid defense meetings start to, working together, although it's not contracted, to get an idea of how does it feel to work with CRO. It's like, buying a car. You need to sit in, you need to, have a test drive to really understand, is it a car for me or not? And that's the same with the CRO.
That makes sense. How broad is your reach? Is it mostly European CROs? Is it worldwide? We
decided to go globally from the very first point in time. Why? First of all, we already had some clients, in the US, in Europe, in Israel, where it makes sense, to already go broad. And the other aspect is that when you're implementing a new business model in an industry, it takes time until people understand what you're doing and what the advantages are. So it definitely makes sense to go broad and, to attract or to speak to everyone who is interested and has the early adopters together very early on. So we are providing, CRO services via our group purchasing organization globally in Europe, in the US, and we can conduct with the vendors that we have onboarded everywhere in the world.
That sounds good. It is a good business.
Yeah. The only thing is that we are focusing more from the indication perspective. We are focusing on oncology, infectious diseases, rare diseases, and dermatology. This is where we are focusing on, because this was then also the nucleus of clients that we had and the nucleus of CROs that we had. And it definitely made sense to start from there.
I am curious, do you have an example of a really good partnership between a CRO and a biotech where everything worked out?
Oh yeah, I really have. I really have, and that was a really interesting project. We were in a selection for a huge phase 3 trial, and we advised the client to go with a very big CRO, just to make sure, that they really have the right resources globally to run this phase 3 trial. Whereas the client said, no, I don't want to have this. I want to work on the same eye level with a more mid-sized CRO, which, we were not, it was more a risk decision where we were going for more less risk and advised the client not to do that. But the client said, no, I want to do that, which is fine. And we supported them in doing that. And it turned out to be a very successful trial. It was one of the most successful trials I've ever seen in my career for me, which meant that it was really the ideal turnkey situation, that they really had no project manager on their side, on the biotech side. It was just the CSO dealing with the CRO. And they had bi-weekly meetings and resolved all the issues that they had, and it was running very smoothly. Although in the end, the trial scientifically failed, it was a success as a collaboration.
That is very interesting. It's not always clear what is needed in a situation.
Totally.
You can be surprised.
You can, it was not like that we are saying, no, it's, this year won't do it. It was more like, let's go for less risk.
When a collaboration between a CRO and a biotech goes really well, how does the patient stand to benefit?
Well, first of all, in one instance, we want to make sure that we get therapies to the market. We want to get therapies to the patients. So the smoother the collaboration works, the easier and the better the compounds get into phase 3 and into market if they are successful. And it also saves a lot of money on the side of the biotech company if things go right and not wrong, which in turn saves some money for the pipeline of developing additional therapies. For the individual patient, it's definitely also has a lot of advantages, which they might not see, in practice in the clinics. But if things go right, and if you have the right vendor, and if things are going from the quality perspective and from the GCP perspective very smoothly and very correctly, it definitely has the greatest advantages for the patients. There's no doubt about that.
I want to ask you this question, and I'm not sure that we have not talked about this before, but here goes. We have this situation now in our market where most clinical trials are conducted by CROs, whether you're a big pharmaceutical company or a small one. That has become the norm. We're also seeing that other functions of pharma are being done by a partner, like manufacturing or marketing or do you think that there may be a situation where companies like yours that broker between different partners of the ecosystem could become the norm, and we see a more maybe decentralized pharmaceutical value chain in general?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about that, but as you said, yeah, I mean. What we are doing is we are also kind of the outsourcing department, if you want to say, and definitely yes. I mean, this is in the end the idea overall, to also outsource this part of the game. However, I think it varies on what biotech companies you are looking at. If you're looking at small and mid-sized biotech companies, it definitely, goes in that direction. From the perspective of supporting in the outsourcing process, the more mature an organization gets, the more important it becomes for this organization to build up their own purchasing and outsourcing department, right? So this is something where I think it is still kind of a core business of a biotech company, because in the end we are dealing with a with the most of the money that they are spending for their R&D processes. However, a GPO, which means they are still funneling through their purchasing volume through a GPO, is definitely something where I think where the vision of PHARALL lies in. We need to adapt this kind of vision in this industry, that although we have our purchasing departments, which all other industries also have, in the end, if we funnel this through for one channel, we can gain additional advantages out of that and leveraging our purchasing volume. Yeah, good question. Thanks for that.
And thank you for considering. Well, Leif, as we draw to a close, we always ask our guests the same question in the end. And that is, if we gave you a magic wand with which you could change one thing in our industry, what would you wish for?
That is a good question. I have something that I really would like to change. What I've seen in the last 2 decades is that small biotech companies are paying a lot of money for their clinical trials, and CROs are making a lot of margin with small and mid-sized biopharma companies. Whereas on the other end, big pharma is getting huge discounts. And I've heard one partner saying, yeah, we can give them like 20% discount easily just in one go. And for me, this is really something that I want to change. Currently, especially in this current market environment where small biotechs are suffering because investors are shying away and, not having the big pockets to fund the next clinical trial. It's crucial for them to make sure that they keep the money in their pockets and to be cost alerted. And this is something that I really would like to change, that, in the end, maybe not today, maybe not this year, but maybe very soon in the future, we can change this in a way that also small biotech companies can have to pay for their clinical trials a little bit less, and maybe get into a position where they maybe conduct also a phase 3 trial and don't have to sell their compounds or out-license their compounds to big pharma, which changes a little bit this monopoly of big pharma companies, and having a little bit some more biotechs in our industry who are capable of conducting phase 3 clinical trials.
I love that wish, also because that would actually nudge the whole dynamic of our industry towards perhaps more innovation.
Yeah. Totally, exactly. This is and this is then in the end something where the patients benefit from dramatically.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Leif, where can people find you if they have follow-up questions or want to be a part of the group purchasing that you have?
Oh, that's easy. Just go to pharall.de. That's PHARALL.de. And there you find everything. You can contact us via LinkedIn. And again, it's an easy process.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
I really enjoyed being on your show. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Ivana.
You're listening to Transformation in Trials. If you have a suggestion for a guest for our show, reach out to Sam Parnell or Ivana Rosendahl on LinkedIn. You can find more episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or in any other player. Remember to subscribe and get the episodes hot off the editor.